Hello, everyone. We want to welcome you to the Citizens Advisory Podcast presented by the Citizens Advisory of Pennsylvania. I'm Jess Stahlnecker, Executive Director, and I'm joined by a very special guest, Gwen Deluca. We've been trying to set up a podcast for a while now, and as you're going to see in this podcast, we've got a little interesting story of how our topic has evolved as we talk to one another. So welcome, Gwen. I would love for you to just tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
My name is Gwen. I am a mother of two children, a wife for many years. I have my master's degree in labor relations, and recently, within the last couple of years, I was a school board director out in Western Pennsylvania. And I got connected with your group. I was looking for some assistance when I was looking through some materials in our school library that I believed were highly inappropriate and violated law.
Yeah, so that is how we were connected. So Gwen, as a school board director, was involved in writing what we would call a common sense policy when it came to the age appropriateness of books in the school library. And she did so much work. She went through and read various books, and she was sort of giving our group that information, which was so helpful. Can you tell us just a little bit about that policy, like what it stated? I believe that it was allowing parents to ask for a review of those books, correct?
Yeah, so the old policy there was two. There was your regular library policy, what gets put in, your weeding requirements, and then there was a policy on challenging material in the library. And I actually used that policy as a taxpayer, even though I was on the board, to challenge multiple materials in the library that were prurient and provided to minors on the bookshelves. And so prior to that, there had been a lot of talk in the nation about library materials and how a lot of it is potentially not appropriate for minors.
Mhm.
So I was looking at our policy and noticed it had not been updated since 2008. And it did not include multiple laws and requirements that I had located. And so I felt we needed to update the policy. Well, it came with a bunch of pushback. The new policy actually involved constituents being able to be part of the review process for new materials coming in. There was still a challenge process, and it actually involved a committee that included community members and for review if there were additional challenges and whatnot. And so we got that in. Election took place. The board switched hands. And their very first meeting, they reverted back to the previous policy, removing the parents, removing all of the Supreme Court guidelines and the state obscenity requirements. And I know that the state, there are exemptions that says basically schools are exempt. However, the very next part, I think that is 18 PA CSA 5903J says that they are exempt. However, under K, it allows schools and other organizations to create policy to regulate those kinds of materials, which would include school districts. But yes, it was overturned by the new board on their very first meeting, and 4 of the 5 new board members brand new.
Yep. So,
It's very unfortunate because they're not protecting the children.
right. Yeah.
It's
So,
it's
I
very
mean,
unfortunate.
it's actually mind-boggling to me why you
Mhm.
would not allow constituents and parents just to be able to challenge or review. It doesn't mean that we're banning anything. It doesn't mean that we're
Correct.
I mean, what's the harm in a review process? And so I think it just goes to show you that there is another agenda that's behind it all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as we started to talk about this policy, because again, we wrote a letter, we thanked the
Mhm.
board for approving that policy. We thought that it was a really, really good model for what maybe should take place across all of the districts in Pennsylvania. And so we were very, supportive of that. We helped make sure that it got, through and all of those things. And then we were very disappointed, of course, when the new board reversed it. So we've talked, Gwen, you and I have talked multiple times since then.
Mhm.
And when we were talking about doing this podcast, we sort of thought our focus was going to be on that policy. But as we started to, and it was very timely because there was a bill passed last
Yes.
week, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I just want to tell our audience, and we've talked about this in other podcasts, but we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive that we weren't expecting to take today
Correct.
into the Pennsylvania School Board Association. So if
Yes.
people don't know, the Pennsylvania School Board Association kind of produces, schools subscribe, right? They have to pay the
Mhm.
PSBA. And they become members of this association, and the Pennsylvania School Board Association provides training to school board members and also provides them with basically cookie cutter policy.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you don't have to adopt that policy, but that's typically what is presented. And school boards, a lot of times, just take what they're given
Yeah.
instead of taking the time like you did to create a policy that is more um, common sense and in line with the values of your constituents. So I think that that's really important to understand, is that the PSBA is kind of behind the scenes in every district in PA. We saw how many, what did we say, 589?
592 memberships paid to the PSBA with taxpayer funds.
Yes. So that there's 500, and I think there's 500. Last year it was said 502 public school districts in Pennsylvania, but the other things or the other entities that can pay PSBA to assist them with policy and training are vocational schools, charter schools, and community colleges, right?
That,
So
that that brings up a really good point, because if you have your local districts paying for memberships, and then you have your vocational schools paying for memberships, and your intermediate units for paying for memberships, how many times is the taxpayer paying for the same memberships?
that is so true. That's so true. That was one thing that we found yesterday. We were like,
Mhm.
they're double and triple dipping into
It
taxpayer.
seems that way.
Yes.
Yes.
So um let's talk a little bit about this bill. So there was a bill last week that was
Mhm.
passed. And when we're talking about these policies that the PSBA puts forth to its members, a lot of them lean typically more on the progressive side. So let's just get that out
Yes.
in the open.
That
Um,
is that is true.
that is true. So you saw that as a school board member.
Mhm.
You're trying to kind of rewrite some of these policies to make them um, more valuable to the people who,
Locally driven.
correct. All right. So last week on May 24th, it was House Democrats along with one Republican passed a bill that would guarantee school board, the PSBA, a monopoly on training
Mhm.
school directors. So it was House
Yes.
Bill 1743. It passed by a vote of 103 to 100. And you might not think that that's a big deal, but why is it? Why is it a big deal, Gwen? What do you think?
Well, so the state has a requirement for elected board directors they're required to take training, and I believe it's 4 hours worth of training. And while that's not a bad thing, I think it's very important, because you have to kind of understand how a school operates, a budgeting, and that kind of thing. The state also has to approve those who train. This is how it was before. I know I took training through the PSBA, and it was the only option there was. So it was a theoretical monopoly. And I'm not the first one to use those terms. So this bill, it's the timing is very, very interesting, because there is another group of people who have been attempting to create a new board training to compete with the PSBA, so that there is multiple views. And just as they're getting off the ground, this bill comes forward, and the state is saying, hey, you're required to take this training. And by the way, you are required to take it only with the PSBA. And did you know that they are a lobby group? They lobby.
Well, that
So,
was another
I
thing.
mean, there's a lot of things that it doesn't sit right and it doesn't smell good.
Right.
Um,
So the group that you're talking about is
mhm,
called School Director Coalition. Okay.
correct.
And I have a quote from her that I pulled from that article. The president, Christina Brsalis, I believe it is.
Yes.
She said, I am aware of the bill and I find it to be a peculiar piece of legislation.
Mhm,
If a multi-million dollar organization like PSBA is so threatened by organizations seeking to improve public education in Pennsylvania that they need to push a bill like this to essentially create a monopoly, then we should all question not just PSBA's priorities, but their use of taxpayer-funded lobbying to
mhm.
promote such nonsensical and undemocratic legislation. And I believe that really it was sort of that quote that led us down a little bit of a rabbit hole yesterday.
Yeah, you could say that. I had always suspected that they were a lobby group. When I was a board director, a few months into, I was appointed. There was a seat that opened. I applied, and I was appointed a seat. So a few months after I got in, we did not renew our membership with PSBA. We wanted to have more local control over our policy and not cookie cutter policy because honestly, most of the schools in the state do belong with the PSBA, and the policies are almost identical. That doesn't make a local public school district. That makes a government school, in my opinion. And we've been on that path for. We're very, very close to not having any local say at all.
100%.
Um, but that being said, yeah, I went in to look for the lobby groups on on the state website, and sure enough, the PSBA was there and has been there for a very long time. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know if you want to put up on the screen something that the PSBA has on their website, which I find to be very troubling.
Yes, I will
If
pull
they're
that.
lobbying on behalf of parents and school districts and constituents, and we're paying tax dollars to become members, why does the PSBA say the PSBA is not in a position to assist with citizen inquiries? So they don't want to hear from the people. They don't want to hear from anybody. They just want to do their thing and have us be quiet. And that to me is extremely troubling.
Right. This is directly from their website. So we're talking about
Yes.
the statement down here. PSBA is a membership organization, not a regulatory body or a state agency. PSBA is not in a position to assist with citizen inquiry. So we cannot contact them. We can't hold them accountable.
Correct.
They don't want to talk to us.
But
Uh,
yet they're lobbying on behalf of the constituents of Pennsylvania for the majority.
right.
Um, we're probably talking 95% of the school districts.
Correct.
Um,
So let's pull up too, because I mean, we brought receipts. It's not like we're just saying that
correct.
a lobby group and then, we're not coming to this with some receipts. So let me pull up just some of the uh, total costs. The funds.
Yeah, this was a little bit alarming as well, but it's all there in black and white, and it's available to find on the state websites.
Yeah. So you could just see, I mean, this is you've got $36,000, 19,000, 22,000, 33,000, all Pennsylvania School Boards Association. Uh,
Yeah, I looked up the last several years, and you're looking at a hundred and about $175,000 to $95,000 per year annually, just listed in their expenses for lobbying.
right, right. So that's we can't even imagine really how many funds went
And
toward.
what are they lobbying for? I mean, there's a whole slew of things, but us as citizens are not permitted to inquire.
Correct. Right. That's the thing. I think that that's what we need to continue to keep in mind is that um, we think we have local control. We think that we solve problems by electing new school board officials, and we think that we solve the, but there's much bigger. There's so much, you
Yeah, that's
other stuff going on behind the scenes that we're not. I mean, when we say sometimes our school board, their hands are tied, they really are.
yeah, it's a false perception that school boards have the ultimate authority. They don't. The state does.
Mhm.
And that has become more and more of a problem over time because you don't have local control anymore. There's all this red tape. You can't write policy in line with the morals and the values and the wishes of your local communities, like we've had in the past.
Right.
It's really unfortunate. You're electing these local officials, and essentially they really have minimal. They do have some power still for the moment, but it's very minimal.
Well, I mean, I think that it's important to say that, like, you guys were able to get that policy passed. And
Yes.
had you all retained seats and everything
Mhm.
stayed status quo, that policy would still be in place.
Yeah.
But it seems like the default is to go back, right back to the cookie cutter of the PSBA. And I'm
Correct.
wondering too, maybe you can speak to this as a former school board member. uh, you know, were there any, like, if you don't use this policy, we're in danger of XYZ? Like, I'm just wondering, like, why school boards feel like they have to be in line with this PSBA.
Yeah. Yeah, they have a teams of attorneys at the PSBA. You can look up their salaries. Some of them are quite hefty.
Mhm.
They write these policies, and in general, I don't necessarily think that all of the policies are bad.
Right.
I do think school boards shouldn't just accept them the way they are. They need to adjust them to their local communities. But it's a good starting point. I don't think that is a bad thing. Um, Now there are other organizations. The Educational Law Center is one of them who wrote a letter to our district. Somebody had contacted them when we were going over the policy that the board I was on had passed. And they said that the policy was an infringement on First Amendment. But it's absolutely not true, because when it comes to minors, the First Amendment does not protect um, obscenities and explicit purient content when it comes to minors.
Right.
So it's just, there's a false narrative out there, and a lot of people don't understand it because a lot of it's been parroted over and over. There's no ban. You can go to your public library, you can purchase the materials for your children. It doesn't belong in a school library where the materials are supposed to support the education and curriculum, and you have smut on the shelves.
Yeah. And I mean, I think
So
that that's too, you're so right in saying that there was that singular narrative out there.
mhm,
It was, against Moms for Liberty, against, like, oh, they're trying to ban books and all this,
yeah,
it really, I think people, they often listen to those narratives, and like you said, it's just kind of in an echo chamber. Everything
yeah,
just keeps getting reverberated, and that's what you hear. Um,
mhm,
so, unfortunately, no one was talking about the policy where no, parents just simply have the opportunity to review the material and to question
correct.
it.
And
That's
the new
it.
policy actually included them more.
Right.
And there still was a review process. It's not like that had ever changed. It was just more defined.
Right.
And it included all of the appropriate laws and definitions and the legal wording. So now the district is now back, and it's really unfortunate because I think there is a huge liability to these districts because a lot of these books have self-harm. There's images of self-harm in some of these books. And if a student is found to do self-harm in some manner, and the result is they received a book, or even digitally a book from one of the school resources, would the district be then held liable? I sure would hope so.
Yeah. Right. So it's just, yeah, I mean, it's a lot. But
It
we
is a
we
lot.
also we also try to make sure that we're encouraging parents,
Mhm.
and making sure that we always end, because that was a lot of information. I mean, we went from talking about policy and a new school board to the PSBA, and how really now, and I don't know, forgive me, but does this still have to go to the Senate, that bill 17?
I believe it does. I don't know the date that goes.
Yeah, we have
Um,
to find out.
so what everybody really needs to do is say, "Hey, this doesn't look right. You're lobbying. We have no say. Why
Mhm.
are you lobbying for this all of the sudden? when you have already been the only one approved by the state thus far? Why not allow somebody else to come in? You're already got the memberships of the majority of the state. You're practically a monopoly. You're not, but you're practically a monopoly at this point. Share it a little bit. Honestly, it just puts a spotlight on them, and it's not a good look.
Nope.
It's really not. It's very concerning. The cookie cutter policies, I mean, it makes me wonder what else they will push. I do know that the PSBA supports a lot of agendas that even nationally are being pushed. But I know most people in my local community don't want that in their district. So if our membership is supplying us with the cookie cutter policies, what's that going to do to our local district? It's doing nothing, because it's doing nothing to help us locally. It's just making us more of a government entity,
Well, I think that
government school, removing the voter's voice.
absolutely. And it's coming from the top down. I mean, all of these very progressive ideological policies that are being passed federally are going to be moving into, I mean, they already are, but even the rewrite of Title IX, things like that, all those things are going to be coming into our school districts locally. And if people think
Right.
that they're not, they're crazy. And with the PSBA and a total monopoly, I mean, we have no shot at changing any of that stuff. So one of the things that I was quoted in that article that we talked about that House bill was a current Perk Valley school director, Perk Yeoman Valley. And I believe that he was there when they did pass the common sense bathroom policy back in the fall, which was quickly overturned by the new school board. He was quoted as saying, although PSBA is a good source for both new and veteran board members, it should not be the only source a director uses. We are elected by the people to think freely and should go into the role with an educational base from PSBA, but also learn to use our hearts and minds to form proper decisions for our students and community. And I think that that is so true. And the
Yep.
essence of what was initially designed when eh, when we had local school boards controlling local schools. So,
Mhm.
and I mean, I do know that there's also a big push to have one massive school board, right? Isn't that something that people are talking about?
Yeah, the state and even at the county level, they're pushing for county-wide school districts. And I understand it from a financial avenue,
Mhm.
sharing resources. However, coming from a district where we did share resources before with other people, it's a good way to hide things. I think there is the opportunity for one school or one area to filter information for the other area, and therefore it's not available through right to knows and in the proper. It gets confused. It's all tangled.
Yes.
But
And
on the
and
county level,
the public has way less transparency.
right there's it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
So but on a county level, every voter is losing their voice because they have less say in how their local school is run. And you may have kids going on one end of the county compared to the other, depending on I guess what they're looking at is locational focuses. One is more academic college prep, and another one is more trade or what
Right.
have you. So there is a lot of talk and a lot of push, and I understand on a budgetary area why that would be attractive. But as a educational view, I think it is very short-sighted.
Yeah, and I also think that you're right. We're losing our local control then, and it's going to
Yeah,
be a lot easier for them to push policies and
you're going to have one master board.
right,
Your vote is not going to count for much,
right.
and you're going to have the same. Well, maybe the board would change to more people, say the same 13 board
Yep,
members
yep.
controlling the entire county, rather than you having 9 at your local one, where you have a little bit more persuasion to go speak to them.
Yes.
You're going to lose that. Your vote isn't going to mean as much. It's not going to hold as much weight. And I, at least for us locally, I don't think that is a good choice. I honestly wouldn't like it for any county.
No, no, I agree with you.
So,
We usually like to end the podcast with just like some encouragement for parents. What can
sure.
parents do? So what would you say? I mean, we just gave a lot of information,
Mhm.
and it seems kind of ominous, right? Like, oh gosh, like we're losing
Right.
control. So what's a bit of encouragement and just some tips for parents in this time frame?
Well, right now, as the way things are, you can still go to your local school boards. You need to go, you need to speak up, you need to pay attention, you need to ask questions, and you need to demand answers. That is vital, right? Why are you purchasing this? Why are you approving that? Has anybody looked into it? Ask questions. Um, on a more state level, which is where a lot more, I think, change needs to occur to give the power back to the people, because I think it has been squashed in so many ways. You need to contact your House representatives and you need to contact your senators. Um, Especially on that current bill. I mean, we've already seen that it's gone through the House. I tried to keep up. I didn't know that was occurring until after the fact, which is very unfortunate because I would have contacted my representative and said, hey, what can I do? How do I get the word out?
Mm-hmm.
So that was a surprise, but we do need to be contacting our senators and saying, hey, you're taking our voice away. This organization lobbies and we don't even have a voice, but they're
Right.
paid through our local districts with memberships using our tax dollars. How is that right? It's just not.
No.
It's just not.
No. Well, I think that, I mean, step number one is what we just did, right? We just
Mhm.
exposed, we brought to light some things that probably were sort of hidden in the darkness. And
Yeah.
so, we're exposing some truth here, and we hope that parents will use this to kind of keep an eye on their school
Mhm.
boards, and to ask those questions and to oppose, the bill that will be making its way to the Senate. So, don't be afraid to contact your school boards, your legislators. All of those people are supposed to be working for you, and so don't be afraid to make your voice heard. And if enough people do that, I think that there is power in numbers. So we do have to make sure that we're not giving up in that regard. Um,
Yeah.
Gwen, I'm so appreciative that you were here. This was fun. I mean, we did do a
Yeah.
little bit of a deep dive yesterday, so that was really fun.
Yeah. It was
Uh,
kind of, it wasn't really the goal, but here we are.
Here we are, and I think that it was great information that
Yeah.
our audience will be really enlightened to hear. So, one of the things that we always say at the end is that you can find us on our website, citizensadvisorypa.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter, Citizens Advisory of PA. And if you're loving this podcast, like, subscribe, share it with other concerned parents, citizens, and just a reminder that we are available wherever you get your podcast. So Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, and we just want to thank Gwen again for joining us today, and for doing all that research. That was eye
Thanks
opening.
for having me. I say keep looking for the information and just put it out there. It's the only way we can share and, you know, express what's actually happening. But you got to have the facts. And I think there's a lot right there that says, hey, it doesn't look right.
Yeah,
Pay
and
attention, ask questions, and contact your legislators because it's going to affect you if you don't.
absolutely. Thanks so much, Gwen. We
Thank
really
you.
bye bye.